So I finally watched Kraven. Oh boy. I don't even know where to begin with this. I don't even know where to begin. Welcome back, everyone. Hello, my name's Amanda. You might know me as Vamp, and I am here to talk to you about Kraven the Hunter. I always want to call it The Last Hunter, but that's not what it is. But it probably will be what this film is, because I don't think we're getting another one of these. I don't think we're getting another one of any of these Sony movies. Morbius 2, when is that happening? What I can tell you happens is this movie. And it's so weird because going to see this movie at the same time that Nosferatu is in theaters, it's like the best and worst of Aaron Taylor Johnson. Although, to be fair, one of the things that I actually liked about this movie was Aaron Taylor Johnson. He might be the only thing that I liked, but there were a few other things. It wasn't, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be, okay? But however, I did go in with the bar set very low, so keep that in mind. The bar was so low, you wouldn't even be able to see it. So let's start off. What is this movie about? Well, for those that do not know, it is about Kraven the Hunter, who is a villain from the Marvel universe, from Marvel Comics. He's a Spider-Man villain. Of course, Spider-Man is nowhere in sight in this film, as with all of the Sony villain films. So, you know, that's the thing we all expected, and that's what we got. And when it comes to this movie, the story is kind of like how Kraven became the Hunter. It's kind of like his origin story. So we learn about his whole family dynamic with his dad, who basically wanted him to like take over the family business, which is a crime business. And Kraven is like a nice guy. Sergei, he's a pretty sweet seeming kid, so he really doesn't want to take over the family business, and he doesn't want to be his dad. And his dad, it's implied, we're not fully sure, but basically Sergei's mom went crazy and took her own life, and I think personally that it all has to do with their father. So that's what I think, but it's not really shown in the film. It's just kind of maybe implied, and basically kept their mom from her kids as well. He definitely did that. Dima, or Dimitri, who we know in this film, who is the Chameleon villain that is also from Marvel Comics and is also brothers with Kraven in the comics, in case you were wondering if they're like making that up. That's not made up, that's a real thing. We always forget about it, but it's true, they are brothers. So he really struggles in the family because his brother is like the golden child, and Dima is, no one really likes him because he's like weak, he's weak sauce. So they end up, after their mother passes, instead of having a funeral for her, their dad decides to take them on a hunting trip because she was weak, so she doesn't deserve a funeral. So they're gonna go hunting instead. I'm not surprised that your sons want to get away from you. So they go hunting, and it's during this trip that Kraven has this accident. He isn't Kraven yet, he's still Sergei, but anyways, he has this hunting accident. He gets attacked by a lion, kind of because of his dad, and then Calypso comes in and saves him. Calypso is a whole thing. Calypso is like a whole thing. They keep calling her Calypso straight up, even though she's like a small child, and it just feels weird to see them call a young girl Calypso all the time. Everyone's calling it her Calypso. Her grandmother, her parents. It's really, really weird. So Calypso comes across young Sergei, who is badly injured, and gets him some magical serum, and it basically gives him life, brings him back to life. But that's not all, because remember in the trailer, remember we got that drop of lion's blood that was in there? That definitely affects the mixture. It definitely gives him lion eyes, and that was the thing that I was worried that they were gonna do, and they did it. So there you go. He's got weird lion powers, kind of. He's got weird animal empathy powers. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing that I didn't like about this film. After a very long 20-minute flashback, can I just say, of all of this information. 20 minutes. We see him, he runs away from home, he's going to basically the wilderness in Russia, this place where he and his family used to camp when he was younger, which his dad never thinks to check to try to find him, wants to find him for years, never finds him, never thinks, maybe I should check that campsite that we always used to go to, that has a physical structure, by the way. There's a physical structure there. I'm assuming that he even maybe owns it. No, I'm not gonna check that. I want my son back, but not that bad. I'm not gonna go back to Russia right now. I don't have time. So that is a whole thing that we get to see, is him training, this beautiful montage. Wait, why did I say beautiful montage? This painful montage, honestly. And then finally, we get back to Aaron Taylor Johnson, which, no offense to these kids are like, they're fine, but I came to see Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven, not this kid as young Kraven. Why was it 20 minutes? So we get back to Kraven, and then Kraven's whole thing is he's hunting down these people that are tusk hunters. They poach animals and they take their tusks, and he doesn't like that because he's all about like fighting for animals. And so he decides to hunt down like every person in this criminal organization that's involved with it. And surprise, surprise, I mean, in the end, do I spoil it? I'm gonna spoil it. Spoilers. I should have said that at the beginning. I'm saying it now. Spoilers. In the end, it obviously is tied back to his dad and his whole criminal organization. It's a whole thing. He kills a lot of people, and he tries to justify it because they are poaching animals, which is terrible, but also, what are we doing here? Calypso also gets involved in this again because one of her friends died because of the criminal organization. And so at the funeral, he runs into her, and he's been looking for this girl that saved his life because she left a tarot card with him. These are tarot cards that her grandma used on the day that she ended up saving Sergei's life. And her grandmother tells her, like, these are very important cards. They mean a lot. You know, these aren't just to be trifled with or used in any way. And, you know, her grandmother passes away. And so when he meets Calypso, he has the card, and Calypso realizes that he's the boy that she saved, even though, you know, he was pronounced dead on the scene. So it's kind of like, how are you even alive? But the best part of it is that she still has the cards, and they're right with her in her bag at the funeral, because she always keeps them with her. I don't know how her grandmother would feel about that. I don't know if it's good to keep tarot cards in your bag all the time. I don't know about that. So that was very convenient. And then they have a whole chat, which is shot terribly, by the way. It's got this like 1-2 camera. We're just going back and forth on the same cameras. It's so boring how it's shot. It's like, I understand we're having a conversation, but could you at least give me something? Why is it shot this way? Why is so much of the film shot this way? So this whole thing where they're just chatting on the bench, and he basically wants Calypso's help in hunting down these people, and she works for like a law firm, and she's like, I don't think you should be hunting down these people. I think these people are gonna come for you. And then they do. They end up coming for his brother. His brother gets taken, and then he goes and he has to save his brother from the people that used to work for his dad, that his dad insulted. And so that's why they came to take his brother, because they want to take over the empire. But surprise, surprise, in the end, it was all organized by his dad. His dad set it all up. And he set it all up to basically get rid of those people, because he knew that Kraven would take them out. I don't know how he knew. I guess that's like, Kraven gets a name for himself for like taking out other criminals. So I guess he thought he could just like rope him in by getting his brother kidnapped, which is obviously something that Sergei would care about, because he still really loves his brother, even though he has like this tense relationship with his dad. He still even seemingly loves his dad, even though he's kind of like, my dad's scuzzy, but he's still my dad. He just doesn't want anything to do with the family business. So his dad ropes him into basically inadvertently helping with the family business. And in the end, Kraven decides to kill his father, and ultimately dons the thing that we see with him in the chair, that whole moment, and becomes Kraven. Which, yeah, there's so many things we have to talk about here. I mean, I talked about some of them in that synopsis, but let's go in and talk about some other things that I did not mention there. So one, the action in this is actually pretty decent, some of the scenes. There's a whole sequence where Kraven runs around on bare feet, and it's horrifying. I the whole time was like, oh my gosh. But I think the whole point of it is to make us feel that way, and to show like just how tough Kraven is, his endurance, and also just how committed he is to get his brother back after he's taken. I think actually the family dynamic stuff was pretty good. I had heard that Rusell Crowe was really bad in this. And then I watched it and I was like, I don't think Rusell Crowe was really bad in this. Like, apparently people were saying like his accent is, I didn't think his accent was terrible. I didn't even think Aaron Taylor Johnson's accent was terrible in this, which I did think in the trailers it was weird, because it sounded like it's American here, it's Russian here. Here it's kind of a little bit of a combo. So the whole thing is that you learn that like he basically, I think, went to school in America, he has an American accent when he's younger, and then they're also in like London, so he would also maybe sound like a little bit British at some point, you would think. But basically the implication is that they kind of grew up in the US, and then their dad is Russian and so is their mom, so I think he has like a little bit of a Russian sound, and then when he's younger, he goes back to Russia and obviously grows up in the campsite. So his accent is kind of like has a hint of Russian to it, but that's why. So it does make sense. And I actually think it's a really good choice, and I actually think he does a really good job, especially when you consider that Aaron Taylor Johnson's actually British. So he's juggling a lot of things, and I think doing an admirable job here. And I think in terms of Rusell Crowe, the worst thing that I can say about his performance in this is just that it's not even his performance, it's just a weird story thing. He's either always sitting or he's walking somewhere to take a seat. That's what he always does. And so in the end, it makes me wonder if when Kraven finally gets his vest and, he sits, that's the final shot, by the way. We only get him in the Kraven look. There was a whole scene in the trailer with him in a cave. Never happens. But that final seat in the chair, we do get. And that, I think, is maybe symbolism that he's becoming his father because his dad always is sitting. I don't know. Is it symbolism or is it dumb? You decide. The other thing that I have an issue with is just that no one really feels as good as Aaron Taylor Johnson does in this film. Like, none of the acting is just at his level, I think. I think that it is hard because he's the one person kind of holding the ship together, but even then, the story is very ramshackle. I mean, I think you can tell from me going through and giving you that synopsis of how much of a mess this story is. It's just like ping-ponging us around to get to cool action sequences, which are cool until the Rhino shows up. The Rhino looks awful, and there's also there's like the worst ADR I've ever seen in a film. It's only one line, admittedly, so thankfully it's not like Madam Web, which had too much weird and bad ADR. But there's a part where they drop like bombs on Kraven, the Rhino, and his goons, who are the people that are ultimately trying to take over his dad's empire, because his dad insulted the Rhino when he was younger and basically called him weak because he's like has an ailment that he's had his whole life, and that's why he has the Rhino juice, which juices him up so his skin turns into it's a very different adaptation. It's a very different adaptation of the Rhino, not a suit that's like melded to him or anything like that. And he does still say he says it at a different time, but they went in a roundabout way to make sure that he said, "Do you want to know why they call me the Rhino?" Except he doesn't say it like that because they did change it. It's like, "You want to know why they call me the Rhino, don't you?" or something like that. And I was like, no way. So you're telling me that in the original trailer we saw where he says that, and we all hated that, they cut that part because it's in a different scene to put it simply in another scene, or he said it twice in the film and they cut one of them. I'm not sure, but either way, they kept that in. They kept that in. We warned them. We said, don't keep that in. It's dumb. They did it anyways. I'm not surprised. I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. That whole part doesn't look very good. The explosion that happens is where the bad ADR is. So the Rhino sends in this explosion. The explosion goes off, and Kraven turns to the camera. I don't even remember what he says, but he says something. He's like, "Oh no, here it comes," or something like that. Something that doesn't even need to be in there. Aaron Taylor Johnson looking at what's going on is enough. I don't need him to say anything. I'm watching the movie. I know what's happening. And he says whatever, like, "Oh no, here it comes," or whatever he says. I don't remember the line exactly. But his lips don't move at all. He's just like, "Oh no, here it comes." And then he runs away. And I was like, what the heck is that? I feel like as this movie goes on, it also gets progressively worse, which is why they showed us the first, whatever it was, like 9 minutes, because it does get worse as you go. It starts off okay, then we get to the whole, your mom died and we're gonna go hunting, and you're like, oh god. And then they go hunting and it's like, oh boy. And then you get into the flashback, you're like, oh no. And then you get back to the main story, and it gets like kind of a little bit better when Kraven comes back in, when Aaron Taylor Johnson comes back in. But then of course, it still gets ridiculous. Oh, and also in his campsite, he has like a ton of weapons. That part was hilarious. So I mean, I don't know. This is a film that I think you could at least watch and it would be funny. It's not trying to be funny, I don't think, but it still gave me a few good chuckles, which is more than I could say about some other movies that I've seen that have been really bad. At least it was entertaining. It was more entertaining than Madam Web, and it was not good, but it had some cool ideas. I think the action sequences were kind of cool. I think what they were ultimately trying to do with Kraven's character was a little bit cool, but I do think they shouldn't have made it about him wanting to protect animals. Why do they have to make every villain like have a heroic like backstory? Like, I don't understand that. I think if they had just focused in on more of like the family dynamic, those elements, why Kraven becomes a bad guy, because he's raised up in this family and it kind of turns him to this dark side to try to almost counteract what his family's doing, and in that way he gets roped back in. So when we have that revelation moment that his dad was behind it all, that could be big. If we had just invested a little bit more time in the family in the movie, I think that would have actually been a bigger moment, and it wasn't because of that. Even though I think that whole idea is kind of cool, honestly. So yeah, it had some cool ideas, but nothing really ever that turned into anything worth watching. Now, I think if you want a good laugh, maybe you could watch it. I will also say I did not go to the theaters to see this. I had to wait for it to become available on rental, because by the time I was able to go see the film, it was no longer really in theaters. Like, it was only playing in a couple theaters and the time was really weird. So I did want to see it in theaters, but I couldn't even do it because that's how bad it is. They like had it in theaters for like a week or two and then they pulled it, basically. It's what it felt like. No confidence in this movie because it isn't very good. So fair enough. Anyways, the Sony universe is dead, so none of this really matters in the long run. I think overall, I'd give this film, I'd still give it like a 1 out of 5, because the 1 is for Aaron Taylor Johnson and some cool action sequences that I thought were genuinely cool. Although his weird like animal vision where he can like zoom in on stuff, he does that so much, and I think it's only useful one time because he recognizes the cigarette that a guy smokes that took his brother, so he's able to use that to like track him. That's it though. And why do they keep showing it? And what was with the whole sequence where like when he drinks the serum and then when he drank a second vial, it did it all again? And I was like, we already did this. I get it. He's getting animal powers or something. Oh my God. Anyways, this dream feels like a fever. This movie feels like a fever dream. It's affecting my speech. I've talked too much about this, so that's the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts on Kraven down in the comments below. And the Sonyverse. Thank gosh, it's done. I'll see you next time. And if you want to watch me talk about Madam Web, if you missed that one, oh, it was a treat. You can check out that video over here. Until next time, friends, stay nerdy. Bye!